Okay, today we're going to talk about arrays and array lists. Now, most of you should be familiar with arrays, but I'm guessing the majority of you do not know what an array list is. So let's take a look. Over here in main, you'll notice that I declared an array, and this looks a little bit different from C. It's declared with the brackets right next to the integer. So int brackets my int array is the name of it, gets new int of size 3. Now this array has a new size of 3 as declared in the declaration right here. As you can see, it's a little bit better user readability because of the brackets that are right next to the int as opposed to on the other side over here. In Java, you can declare it this way as well, something you're more familiar with. However, I suggest that you don't. The only reason that is that the reason why this was declared this way, and a lot of users also do it that way, it's for readability purposes. You notice that right away when you read int index and int brackets my int array, you knew right away when just looking at the ints that this was an array and this was just a regular int, as opposed to reading it and then finding out later on when you look at the name of it that it's an array. Okay, better readability. Now this one has a size of 3. In Java, arrays are initialized to its default values. For instance, this int array default value is 0, so all the positions of the array, all 3 of them, are actually initialized to 0. Whereas string arrays, like the one right below it that I made, if it didn't have anything in it, it would actually be initialized to null. Okay? So whatever the primitive or object defaults are is what the array is going to be set up in. Now you notice that the string array that I have down here is declared a little bit different. I actually instead of making the size, I actually just put 3 things in it, and this automatically gives a size of 3 and initialized it right away with some strings inside of the array. Position 0 has first, position 1 has second, and position 2, I'm sorry, has the word third in it. Now you notice I said 0, 1, and 2. The reason being is that you always count the array starting from 0. Just like this one. This one has a size of 3, and this one has a size of 3, but you count 0, 1, 2. It always starts at 0. Okay? And if you look down here at position 0, I put a 4 in it, and that's how you would assign items to the array. Now you notice right below it, print array, I use a for loop and to print out the elements in the array, in the int array and the string array. You notice that down up here in a for loop there is a dot length. Now if you hit the dot length, it'll automatically give you the size of this int array, which would be 3. You don't have to put 3 here. You just go whatever the array name is, hit the period, and length afterwards, and you're able to use that in your for loop. You loop through it standard by using the variable name that's being incremented inside of the array, and it prints out the array. Okay, and let's go ahead and run that. You notice that there you go, first 0, second 0, third index at 0. Well, that's different. It goes onto the array list. But there you go, 4. There's that 4 I added in the beginning of the array. Then first, because I printed both the string array and the regular int array at the same time. So 4 first, 0 second, 0 third. So excellent. Now this is something you're not familiar with. It's called an array list. And what the array list is, excuse me, is that it's a dynamic array. That's the way I like to look at it. This is very static. The size never changes. It's always going to be 3 no matter what. Even if you don't have anything in it like we do here, I only have integer 4 inside of position 0. And even though I don't use the other two, it's still there. The size still remains at 3. A dynamic array, or an array list, you notice that it's declared, and I made it an integer array list. What it is, it doesn't really have a set size. The size actually grows and shrinks as you add and take away from the list. Now, this is how you declare an array list, and you notice that it says array list, and I have little gators here. Inside of the gators, you put down what the type is. So this one was an integer array. This one's an integer array list. If it was a string, I would put string in there. If it was character, I would put character in there, and so on. I call it my int list. Gets new array list, and of course you have to finish it off by putting the same parameter here as you would there. And this is actually a constructor, so you would call it to make this array list. Now the array list doesn't have anything in the list, and the way to add to array list, you use this .add method. And I added the number 4 because it's an integer. Takes it an integer. I added the 4 to the array list. This is how you would add to the array list, by using the .add. Now, if you want to remove from the array list, you actually have to give it a position to move from. So you can't just say 4, because it doesn't know what you're talking about when you just put 4. If you just put remove 4, then it would just actually go to position 4 and try to remove something there. The reason being is that they could be multiple integers with 4, so in different locations. So what it is they ask for a specific position to remove from. In our position, we only added one element, which was number 4. So I want to remove position 0 because that's the only thing that it has, because right now the size of the list is just 1. So, and we also we count from 0 as we do arrays. So I remove from the position 0, and it'll remove this 4. I added back to the list 8, so now the size is back at 1 again with one element, and it's 8. Down here is another useful method that's in the array list, which is index of. So now I could search the array list and find the first occurrence of the number 8. And what it does is searches and finds the index and assigns it to this variable index that I declared up here that's just an integer, and it gives it the position of it. So it tells me the position of where this 8 is, the first occurrence of 8, of course. And I printed it out right here. You notice that index is at 0 because this I added this to the list, I removed it, then I added it 8, and I went searching for it, and it told me that the index is at 0, which is correct. It's at 0. The index is at 0. Then, of course, you print using a for loop, and instead of length, you use size in an array list. So my int list.size gives you the size. You use my int array.length for an array. You use size for an array list. And you loop through it, but instead of brackets, what you do is use the get method. It will give you the it'll give you the element at a specific index right here. So the counter is the one that's going through it, so it'll start from 0 and all the way up to whatever the size of the array list is. So this will get the element that's in that position by the counter. In our case, it's just a size of 1, so it'll start from 0, get increment to 1, and then break. And it only prints out 8 because that's all that's in it down here. Alright, well, hopefully this was helpful. Practice makes perfect with arrays and array lists, but these are some methods here that are very helpful with the array lists, and these are helpful with an array. Now, one is static, the array, and one is dynamic, the array list. Both has its usefulnesses. Some things need to be static, and that's what you would use in an array, something that has a set size. And some things need to be dynamic, where you don't need a set size, you just need it to grow and shrink at your will, and that's when you probably would use an array list. And that's all I have for you today. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.